Nompumelelo Siziba on SAFM.
Well, we chatted agricultural sector and job creation, economic development, the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution with the following speaker, Peter Setou, Chief Executive of Vumelana Advisory Fund. Continues to turn on the issue of expropriation of land without compensation, with Parliament expected to adopt the Joint Constitutional Review Committee's recommendation that Section 25 of the Constitution be amended to make the state's ability to expropriate land without compensation more explicit. The reality on the ground is that under the prevailing constitution and laws of the country, the government has been in a position to exercise land redistribution, but the general feeling among agricultural experts is that the exercise has been a big failure. And because the unfolding political situation is said to be happening because the land reform process has not worked as well as was hoped, there are some who argue that we need to take a closer look at why land redistribution efforts have not worked so well. To share some of his insights, I'm joined on the line by Peter Setou, Chief Executive at Vumelana Advisory Fund. Peter, under current law, it's often argued that the state is able to assert its authority and expropriate land without compensation. So going back to the thrust of why the ANC has decided to amend the Constitution and the recent joint CRC exercise, do we understand why we are where we are now?
Well, I think it's important to put some of the events into perspective. One, land reform has actually taken quite some time. I mean, over the last 20 years or 20 odd years or so, majority of South Africans still remain eager that land reform has not produced the desired results. And this has actually led to despondency on the part of the majority of South Africans, which has led to the processes that we currently have, you know. And I think it's also important to reflect that South Africa is a democracy, and it was important for a process of this nature to actually take place.
Yeah. Peter, let me just interject there and just ask you, in your view and based on your experience working in connection with the agricultural field, why do you think the land reform process, which by most accounts has gone wrong, what at its center has meant that it's gone wrong?
Well, there are a number of factors as to why land reform has not produced the desired results. And I'm just going to refer to a few. One, in our view, there hasn't really been consensus among the general population, different stakeholders in South Africa on the need for land reform and what should such reform, the complexion of such reform, how should it look like? That's the first thing. Secondly, there has been insufficient attention to the manner in which land is used, i.e., once land has been given to beneficiaries of land reform, there has been limited attention really paid to whether people are able to use their land effectively or whether they've got the resources that they supported is their post settlement support to make sure that people can use their land effectively. The third issue that I can refer to is the restitution process itself. I mean, it's inefficient, it has been inefficient, it has taken a long time. It takes sometimes much longer to have some of the claims resolved. And this has really, created some levels of uncertainty amongst some of the beneficiary community. The redistribution process, for example, the lack of transparency and clarity in respect of the redistribution procedures. It is important to make the redistribution program more transparent, so that ordinary citizens really know how can they benefit, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The third thing is lack of attention to tenure reform. I think from the three branches of land reform, tenure reform is probably the one that receives limited attention. The other two areas that I would like to quickly refer to is really access to finance for land reform beneficiaries. It's one thing to give people land, but if they don't have access to finance to actually turn those funds to be productive, it doesn't really help. And the reality is it's very difficult, if you are a land reform beneficiary, to get access to finance from your formal financial institutions. So there is a need to make sure that we look at innovative ways through which land reform beneficiaries could be assisted. Then lastly, inefficient resources and limited institutional capacity. Specifically here we are talking within the state. So it is therefore important to make sure that the current resources are really looked at to make sure that we can ensure that there is meaningful progress in land reform. We need resources by the public as well as the private sector to make sure that land reform becomes a success.
So, Peter, your organization is in the business of helping to partner up black community landowners, teaming up with private sector players to exploit the land to its full potential and achieve a sort of win-win for all parties. So how does this model work in practice? And cite to us some of the successes that you've observed through these programs.
The Vumelana Advisory Fund assists beneficiaries of land reform to develop their land. We do this through funding what we call transaction advisory services in order to structure commercially viable partnerships between beneficiaries of land reform on the one hand and investors. Our main focus really is on creating jobs, skills development and income generation. Typically what we do is, once we have been approached by a specific beneficiary community, we would enter into a memorandum of understanding with this community. We would then proceed to appoint a team of transaction advisors who would have deal facilitation, financial, legal, and community facilitation skills. And they would then embark on a process to do investment mobilization for this specific community or for the farms in question.
Right. Well, that was Peter Setou, Chief Executive at Vumelana Advisory Fund. You can get the rest of that clip from our MoneyWeb website a little bit later on in the evening.